So typically, when it comes to buyer personas or even segments, we have what we call demographics, right? Everyone who knows about business knows what demographics are. But let's say you're a seasoned entrepreneur, no, unseasoned. You don't know what demographics are. It's your really easy things to ask for when perhaps you might ask someone, tell me who you are, right? You might tell them your age, your gender, you might tell them your nationality, your race. You might tell them how many people are in your household. I'm just listing this off of what you ask in a survey, right? But beyond that, right? What else? What is it that we can ask someone to tell us who they are? And, this overlaps into psychology within marketing. And who are these identities that we're trying to build when it comes to market research, to building a buyer persona or a segment, and how can it be helpful for us? And this becomes especially important when you're dealing with a global company, a much larger company, or perhaps if you're thinking about expanding to a new location, even within the same country, right? So, take, for example, the United States. There's typically rules in marketing, like if you want to test a new product, you do it in Ohio, which is funny, but I learned that like a while ago in college, that is. But that's what Wendy's does. But say that the culture, right? You're operating in, I don't know, North Carolina. You have this culture of people that you know, and you want to open up to somewhere that's quite adjacent, but a bit further because there's some demand there from whatever survey that you're doing, or perhaps even just online reviews and things saying that, yo, we want you to come out and pop a location at Georgia. That's quite a few states away, but the US itself is a melting pot of cultures. And if we just assume that North Carolina is the same as Georgia, we're going to be vastly wrong in terms of customer service, in terms of, how long wait times are expected there, all these types of things. And so when it gets to buyer persona and segment, we got to think beyond just demographic in general, because it can only tell us so much. If we think about who we are as people, it's not just the things that we see on the outside, but it's who we are that makes up our identity. And so let's take a step back. What is it that I'm trying to say? And I promise I won't beat around the bush anymore. Really easy, pretty simple if you know business as well. It's psychographics. Psychographics is essentially the psychological profile of your buyer persona or your segment. Now, this gets more into the abstract content of your needs, your motivations, your wants, right? What is it that you desire? What are your habits? And what are you frequently thinking? Repulsive from? What are the things that you constantly feel from different sources? Where do you find your joy, your happiness, your sadness? And what is it that causes impulsivity, right? And what is it that causes you to behave a certain way? And these psychographics are a lot more difficult to measure because typically you can't do it. It's just not something you can quantify. And that's not to say you can't run surveys through a platform and ask people about their psychographics. You certainly can, but in terms of psychographics, there's a lot more bias because what we tend to answer when it comes to that is we answer in a way of what we believe we want to be like instead of what we actually are. And so there's always that. Of course, there's bias of, self, I forget what the word was, but like wanting to take the survey yourself. I forget what it's called. Yeah, whatever. So there's that. And then the easiest way to also just get more data on it is to do a lot of qualitative interviews. And that's typically going to be your gold mine of information and kind of why we do qualitative and quantitative, right? We're asking different things here for different reasons. We might ask about demographic in a quantitative, but we're asking more for psychographics compared to demographics. We're asking psychographics from a qualitative perspective, but also to lead our quantitative survey. So there's all these things that are cuddling and intermingling together. That's really fascinating. The other thing that we also want to take into consideration, as I mentioned earlier, is just culture, right? And this can be broken down to either from city to city, state to state, country to country, and there's all these fascinating ideas and theories that goes into play when it comes to business, right? Whether you're a small business owner, whether you're just starting out to be professional, or even you're in your professional role and need a reminder. I took classes in Japan about business, and there's so many fascinating because people just love to compare countries against other countries. Like Japan was obsessed with comparing the US to Japan, and I don't know about if it's like the same the other way around. But there was a lot of differences in theories, such as individualism versus collectivism. There's different things such as cultural norms, how we participate in a business meeting, how we perform during work compared to after work. What do we do after work? And all these things that affect how we negotiate a partnership or a acquisition or perhaps a merge, right? And so when it comes to something that extreme, that's going to take a lot of experience that, market research will assist with, but there's a lot more to it. I'm assuming that you know, you're not that. In any case, state to state, there's always going to be cultural differences, such as whether people are waking up at different times. There's even different times that people eat certain meals, right? And it's different from person to person, group from group, state to state. And this matters a lot if you're in the CPG industry, or perhaps, let's say you're in the health or the skincare industry, kind of what is trending around. There's going to be different things that determine who is going to be your best customer with different cultures. They're not always going to use the same thing. Like, Korean skincare got really, really popular, and I use it myself. But not every race, not every person is going to use it because they all have different beliefs. And sometimes they just make products that are meant for them specifically and their group of people. And that might not be a customer that can be acquired at all, no matter what advertising that you do. And so, because of these cultural beliefs and stuff, does that mean that we expand to include them? You know, and that's the fascinating thing about market research. It opens up questions and doors to what we can do. Because if you're a Korean skincare company, you might just, have the best ingredients and it actually works. You're not freaking Neutrogena, or whatever. But instead, you might say, okay, let's open up to, Japanese skincare or whatever. But your corporate and manufacturers are in Korea or whatever. And then, cool, you got a Japanese demographic now. You might say, okay, I see that there's going to be a raise in interest in skincare within people who are European. So let's do something a lot more like that. And let's expand and see what Neutrogena is doing in that matter. And the ingredients are going to be different, but ultimately you're expanding your buyer persona, you're expanding your segment, you're also expanding your product variety to target all these people. And that's exactly why we go beyond just demographic, right? It's beyond just who we are, but also where we live, what we believe, and what society we grew up in, and the things that we tell ourselves to other people and to ourselves as well. I was kind of yapping in this video, but if it's been helpful or anything's been confusing, just leave a comment and I'll reply. See ya.